We've been fighting the Siege of Orison for some time, so let's have an honest chat about what it does well and what it really needs to improve. An after-action report talks about something in terms of what was good and should be continued, and what was not so good and could be improved. It's easy to get issues confused between what was a problem with the event and what is a problem with the game that affected the event. For example, AI reacting slowly or not at all is an issue with the game, not dynamic events. So whilst I'll still mention them, my focus will be on the issues that were specific to Siege. Let's take a look at how things were supposed to run. If you don't want spoilers, skip ahead to the next section. The CDF have been called to Inspiration Park, a group of platforms hosting a corporate event that the Ninetales have attacked. On each platform, locate a Ninetales lieutenant who will have the codes for that platform's IFF inverter. It's this that has tricked the AA defences into attacking friendlies. It'll be located in one of these crates, use the lieutenant's codes to access it, and shut it down. Now Crusader Industries have approved the use of any serviceable ships to get you to admin platform. Defeat the AA turrets and fighters, kill the lieutenant and deactivate the IFI, then head to the cargo barge to engage the Ninetales commander. Just leave yourself a ship to get out of there. Siege of Orison has been a mixed bag. The scale of the event is bigger than anything CIG has tried before, and the level of detail on each of the platforms honestly blew me away. It's captured mass combat and combined arms like nothing else in the game so far, and is easily my favourite dynamic event. Yet it suffered from numerous technical problems and oversights, some even sufficiently serious enough to stop the event being completed at all. So, that's where we'll start, with the stuff that needs improving. One of the most obvious issues is that every objective in Siege is a rush objective. If you don't get into the event very quickly after it begins, you have a low chance of actually participating in any of the key objectives, like killing the lieutenants or the boss. You're much more likely to find the IFF inverter, but due to how that objective is arranged, with crates scattered all about that you need to search, you'll often be some distance from the next shuttle if you're the one to find it. The result seems to be that players end up in one of two groups, those rushing ahead to kill the next objective, and the group lagging behind who are finding the inverter and generally trying to catch up. You can go entire events without ever directly contributing to any of the objectives, and that makes Siege feel much less rewarding than it should. Objectives like this aren't a problem by themselves, but we need other engaging objectives, like the promised side quests that don't seem to have materialised yet. They should pop up throughout the event so we can feel like we're contributing regardless of when we got there. As systems are added and dynamic events become a result of what's happening in the verse rather than being announced in advance with a schedule, people are going to have to travel to them from further away. And they aren't going to do that if everything runs off a first to the key mentality.
Oh my god! We're under attack. Security's been overrun. Please, help us.
That trailer does a good job of pleading to our humanity. This attack is in process, and civilians are caught in the crossfire. Yet, when we get there, those objectives have been boiled down to kill this guy, loot his code, use that code, and repeat. So, Siege doesn't feel as epic as it should. Despite claims that Star Citizen will be a universe where we can choose our own path and every activity will be interesting, these dynamic events have all been kill-focused, with rewards based on just how murder hobo you managed to be. If any event was going to showcase how CIG intended to incorporate, say, medical, humanitarian, or even corporate intrigue elements into a game, shouldn't this have been it? So if they do include those pop-up quests, make them more than about just killing. An entire corporate event has been attacked and people need help. Let's reclaim a med centre, heal NPCs and evacuate them, stop a public execution, locate and extract the VIP. And what about the corporate aspect? Corporate secrets to recover or trade as contraband, prototypes to destroy, servers to secure. There's plenty of shooting to go round in this event. Reward us for choosing to do other stuff as well. Siege doesn't do the greatest job of telling its story. Sure, there are a couple of standout areas like the Down Cutlass for example, but generally one platform looks very much like the next. There isn't the clear distinction between them that you can see in, say, the comfort of Cloudview Centre or the industrial purpose of Providence Platform. I'd be hard pressed to tell them apart without depending on the layout, so the visual storytelling is lacking. I know they needed to add cover, but everything seems to be a military crate. It's like this area's been at war for weeks and not hours. The NPCs aren't helping either. They seem to be scattered randomly, as do their spawn closets. In a game that's incorporating realism and a cause for everything, I was hoping to be able to see purpose in where the NPCs were stationed and what they were doing. This is all a really long way of saying that at some point Siege can feel a bit more like generic space shooter 2020 than the deep immersion we've been promised. The sooner CIG get into the swing of this, the better the game will be at the end of it all. It takes time to land and disembark large quantities of gear, for example, so wouldn't it make sense that the Ninetales would create a couple of strongholds at strategically vital positions, rather than just scattering their stuff all over the place? It should be clear from the type of NPC, their surroundings and their actions, what they're up to and why they're in that position. Remember that controversial opinion I mentioned earlier? Well, it's coming. These ships that we use to get to Orison, I fully applaud CIG letting players figure things out for themselves. But this was not the moment. The transit to admin and landing amongst all that AA fire is for me the single most challenging part of the whole event. Yet, so many of us found ourselves at the mercy of people who don't understand or don't want to understand how that bit works. And speaking personally, I found it a really hard transition. After running around on the ground for a couple of hours in combat, I saw these as just shuttles rather than an opportunity to fly tactically. For the most challenging part of the event, so many of us are just passengers, unable to do anything to affect the outcome and completely at the whim of whichever lunatic managed to reach the pilot seat first. The bit that we have to figure out for ourselves also happens to be the single critical point of failure in the entire event. And the results, well, they were pretty predictable. Controversial opinion alert, I genuinely don't see a need for the ships in this event. Yes, they're cool. Yes, we get big explosions and fun with tonks. But there are plenty of opportunities to do that later in the game's development. Right now for Siege, it feels like a step too far. Not to mention how we deal with that once you can't fly in armour anymore. But let me know what you think about that or anything else I've mentioned down in the comments. And whilst Vulkan and the Gen 12 renderer has done wonders for the frame rates of many, we're all aware that Orison's frame rate problems are far from over. It takes a beast of a PC to render this place properly, and many avoid it altogether because no one wants to game at sub 20 FPS. A dynamic event here kind of feels like trying to run before we can walk. Ugh, PvP. Look, sure, CIG didn't intend for this to be a PvP event, but they didn't stop it either. So all those choke points that can be really cool against AI became griefers' paradises, and every elevator a potential death trap. And there are a lot of those elevators. Not to mention that the odd psychopath would take a ship and turn it against other players when they felt like it. Now CIG did state they knew this could be an issue and they were going to monitor it, but it had the potential to be a massive event breaker. Issues we've been putting up with for a while have affected the event too, and I'll mention them now, mainly because I'll get shouted at if I don't. Anyone who has run a bunker mission will know about NPCs not spawning, clipping into the world, spawning out of thin air directly behind you. It's not unique to Siege, but some of my most deflating moments in this game have happened after a long hard fight across 3 platforms, watching strangers come together and figure it all out, only to stop dead because, like on the screen now, we couldn't kill the lieutenant because he spawned in the floor. It's one thing to happen on a bunker mission, it's something else entirely to stop an entire dynamic event because you can't kill the big bad. And the elevators, the goddamned elevators. Just when you thought it was safe to get back in one, they take their revenge. From not letting you in, to not letting you out, to not turning up, or having invisible walls, 17.2's elevators are asshats of the highest order. Whilst many have figured out that if you just take off your gear you can respawn at the hospital, I'm pretty sure that has resulted in elevators having more player kills than the rest of 17.2 combined. And it won't come as a shock to anyone who's ever played SC to say that NPC behaviours just generally fall short. The idea of counterattacks I mentioned earlier sound great, but anyone who's ever seen the Cutlass land at a derelict outpost with some reinforcements will know that it can take them literally minutes just to decide to get off the ship, if they do that at all. Similarly, NPCs conducted coordinated counterattacks, and any form of scripted behaviour just seems to be beyond the scope of what AI is capable of in this game right now. And then there's hit registry, reloads not actually being reloads, slow inventory times for equipping fresh mags, loot bugs, and that whole list of stuff that has existed for some time, still impacting the game in a negative way. They're just worthy of being mentioned separately here, because I don't think we can expect any sort of quick fix for them. I've been pretty hard on Siege up until now, but there is a lot here to like. Some of my favourite moments in the game have come about during this event. This will be true for many of us, but I find Star Citizen so much more engaging when I'm playing with friends. And from being a sniper team on one of the towers, to having the NPC who was about to kill me shot by a sniper friend, Siege is a pretty successful sandbox, letting you and your mates choose how you want to approach each platform. Being thrown together with other players is at the core of each dynamic event. And we found so many people who were great to play with, from our Orison May 2 pilot on my last attempt, to the randoms who grouped with us or came to heal us, or rescued us from bad spots. The footage on now is actually one of my favourite moments, where Can and I were the first 2 players into this area. After the first engagement with the AI, they just kept coming at us, which really gave the feeling of being detected and then being counterattacked, even if that wasn't really what was going on. And it's great to see CIG flesh out some interior combat areas. There's the Oza restaurant that looks really upmarket, the offices that, whilst looking like offices, still give space for manoeuvre, and the gyms that hold the medbeds for the event as well. And whilst I might not personally be a fan of the assets used to create all the cover, the platforms have proved to be great FPS arenas. It's tough to find ways to add verticality and height to firefights, but CIG have absolutely nailed it. All of this leads me to wonder where this sort of stuff might go next. I mean, sure, there are bug fixes and other changes to worry about first, but think about the sort of improvements that could be made to make events like this more epic. What about smoke grenades for our cover, and a suppression mechanic for players and AI to make suppressing fire actually mean something? Some form of binoculars wouldn't go amiss, or night vision and other optic modes. And if I wanted to go a little over the top, how about giving people time to get to the start point for a big opening sequence? Arrive late and you can still take part, but the first wave gets sent in a scripted landing sequence where players arrive in Valkyries, the IFIs get switched on, and then NPCs friendlies are shot down and general carnage ensues. That would spawn side missions all by itself, like rescuing downed pilots or recovering valuable weapons from the wreckage. And looking further ahead, it would be great to see actions we've taken in the game have effect after the event is over, like befriending that NPC downed pilot you just rescued, or being able to sell corporate secrets to the wrong sort of people, but only after you've proved yourself, of course. Thank you so much for making it this far. Consider hitting that like button, and if you're not already subscribed, it would be great to have you along for the ride. This is a new style of video for me, using a lot more of my own footage and a new editing system, so let me know what you think. You've been watching Drinkers with Gaming Problems. Thank you very much for stopping by. I'll see you soon.